Welcome to the Learning Can't Wait podcast, a Full Mind production. At Full Mind, our vision is to ensure every child has access to an exceptional education. Each episode, we will be joined by pathfinders within and around the education space who are bringing about transformational change on behalf of deserving students. I am your host, Haley Spierbauer. Welcome back, everybody, to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. Today we have a panel, and I love a panel. You get diversity of thought, opinion, and voice. And we have three incredible folks joining us here today. We have Kalpana Rao, Kyle Conley, and Jennifer Dubey, all co-founders of Building Leaders. Welcome, everybody, to the podcast.
Thanks, Haley.
Thanks for having us.
So we're all recording from different locations, which makes my screen a really cool Brady Bunch picture right now. But I'm really excited to have all three of you here joining me today. I know you're building something new, but you all come with a breadth and depth of experience in the education space. And I'm really excited for you to share that here. So I'm going to just start us off by asking, and I'll start with you, Kalpana, how did you come to be the personal and professional version of yourself?
I love this question. I think I started really even in high school, middle school, high school, thinking a lot about racial and social justice issues and kind of acting up and noting disparities. And then eventually decided to apply my effort towards that, towards addressing those in education in specific, in particular. I ended up teaching in various turnaround schools from Compton to Milwaukee to Boston to Denver. I was a school leader in Milwaukee, Boston, and Denver as well. And at some point, the challenge of turnaround work and really sometimes the challenge of being a principal is, and also maybe the American myth of like your work and your productivity is your self-worth, which we know is not true. But at some point for me, that meant burnout. I then later went abroad and I did not totally different work, but I worked in nonprofits and really just found myself again, found my hobbies, found balance, found well-being again. And that was all amazing work in Australia and South Africa, but eventually I missed schools because schools are amazing. And I went to the other end of the socioeconomic spectrum and was a principal in Japan at an international school for several years. And that was also really, really beautiful and amazing work. I did that through COVID, which has its own special type of challenges. And frankly, I burnt out again. And so I am kind of resetting, refocusing, redesigning what leadership and success looks like. I coach school leaders and I'm building something exciting with Jen and Kyle right now.
I appreciate the breadth of your experience and really the types of different school systems you had the opportunity to teach and lead in. I think that will add a lot of color to our conversation today. Kyle, same question for you. How did you come to be the personal and professional version of yourself?
Thanks. I really love this question as well. I think I've reached the age where I can safely look and see the connection of how my personal and professional lives have sort of connected with one another. Through my career, as a teacher, I was a district administrator, school assistant principal, and principal. That professional side of me lining up right now with where I am personally as a partner and a parent, having an opportunity to move my family abroad to go work in global education. I've really been centered. I think that the common theme is really looking carefully at how people learn and how we, whether that's, students or adults, and just trying to, really explore how we can serve those that are learning and when we can turn that curiosity into something great. So I think that journey of like watching my personal and professional lives come together has been really very beautiful. And so today I really see myself as someone who's building spaces for that learning. I obviously I'm starting this Building Leaders juncture, but I'm also a coach and a mentor. I'm a parent and I'm an elected official on our school board. So there's a lot of opportunities for me to really explore that question of how we learn best.
You probably have a lot of free time too, based on all the things you just shared that you're doing. I always tell folks, educators have to be forever learners because one, we're always finding out more information about brains and brain science and how our brains operate. We still don't have all the answers. And two, if we expect our kids to be continuous improvers, we should be too. So excited to dive into your own opinion on that front, given that it sounds like you two embrace the idea of forever learning and forever improving, Kyle.
Yeah, 100%. Lots of thoughts.
And Jennifer, last but not least, how did you come to be the personal and professional version of yourself?
It's perfect that you're just talking about forever learning because I was going to share first and foremost, I see myself as a lead learner. And that is really, and as well as a recovering overachiever.
Mm.
And those two things really, I feel like kick off when I reflect on like my first year teaching and really for the first time in my life struggling mightily with doing something on my own. Like being able to just get in a class, plug away at something, work hard and get my laurels and my achievement. And teaching was not like that. That's not how you become an effective teacher. It's about collaboration and community and relationships. And building off of that for the rest of my career and my personal life, I've just deeply invested in what does it look like for my own constant learning, as well as for being in spaces and creating spaces for people to learn from their rich, full experiences that they bring, from failing and that being okay, from being able to be really open and honest. So I've coached, I've been a school leader, and I've also created and led a lot of programming where folks are able to kind of be in spaces that they can be safe to try and be honest and open and keep learning and growing. Yeah, the lifelong learner as well as lead learner really resonates for me of who I am personally and professionally.
I see why y'all got together to do something awesome because there's so much similarity and threading between what each of you have shared so far about what you believe to be important as professionals, as leaders in systems. But I want to dig in a little deeper to that. Now that you're on the outside of supporting school leaders instead of being one, Kyle, I'll start with you. What do you see differently? What's clear now that wasn't when you were in that seat?
When I was a school leader, I mean, I think I've had a lot of time to really reflect on this. The reality is that I, like so many other school leaders, was probably promoted to the role of principal before I was ready. I was a fantastic teacher. I was really driven to have high levels of impact, and it turned out that all of those skills that made me successful as like a teacher coach and even as an assistant principal did not necessarily mean that I was prepared for the principalship. So, and one of the things when I reflect on that, I think what was at the core of what I would do differently or how I see the role of principal differently is I think I was trying really hard to be somebody else's version of a school principal, whether that was like something that I had read somewhere about, what needs to happen in order for you to be successful or some policy that I needed to have in place. And I don't think that I really had a good sense of who I was and what I stood for. Because if I could do it differently now, I would be much more intentional about building learning spaces for my teachers. I was the principal of a capital T turnaround school in Aurora, Colorado. Aurora is a designated refugee relocation city. About 20% of my 750 students were new Americans that had come with refugee status. And the rest of them spoke Spanish at home. So we were we were a beautiful, wonderful, fantastic school with really amazing teachers. And I sort of had it in my head that because we'd been given this capital T turnaround school label, that somehow I needed to flip everything upside down instead of really building vulnerable, safe spaces for my teachers to thrive. And so that's something that I absolutely wish that I had had the maturity of leadership in that moment to recognize.
Yeah, it's hard, right? Like I learned from doing, but education doesn't feel always like you can learn from doing because children's educations are at stake.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
for leaders, taking risks and teachers taking risks is scary. Kalpana, talk to me about your philosophy on risk taking in education. How does your experience in the US versus abroad really inform what you believe today?
Oh, so much. I mean, I was a school leader and a teacher and educator for a long time in the US. And so I grew up in that system, if you will, as an educator. But once you leave it, and this will probably come back to this metaphor again, but like you can then look at that fishbowl quite differently because you're not in it anymore. And so I have a lot of critical thoughts around accountability and how we use it as a tool, like a punishment, and a whip instead of, it being a carrot or a bar to set, how holistically we educate or don't educate children. There were so many places outside of the US where, I would be at a school supporting one of my leaders, and, the lines weren't super straight when they came in from recess. They lined up and they talked, and the line was pretty crooked and it was pretty loud. And then the teacher would come out and they'd more or less quiet down, and then they'd get back to class. And it's okay. Like it was okay that they weren't like perfectly straight, like they were lining up in prison or something. There were things that we've come to emphasize in the US sometimes around discipline or order or the way that turnarounds, and other types of schools have to be successful. And the rest of the world has really different ideas about that. And they're
Mm.
more holistic. They care a lot about the socio-emotional side of things. They so I think a lot of that has been really, really different. There's a lot of critical thinking and well-roundedness that I see in other schools and other school systems than I see sometimes in America. And that again comes back to the accountability focus that we get really hooked on the numbers and like only what kind of students they are versus what else they have to offer. And so, in so many places in the country, in the US, we're cutting programs, we're cutting opportunities of other ways of knowing kids, and other ways for them to shine. And that's not to say that they shouldn't also be able to shine academically and they should be able to read at grade level and all of that, but that there's more paths, there's more holistic ways to look at children than just a number, than just a test score, than just the reading, writing, arithmetic stuff that often happens in the US. That's a major, major one for me.
Yeah, and you get this really kind of seesaw approach from the media about where we have to turn our attention. Like, is it NAEP scores or is it the mental health of students? And I think what I hear you saying is it's not an or, it's an and, right? Like,
It's an
we
and.
put them both together. That's what makes a whole child, and that's where our attention should be. So I'm curious, Kyle, it looks like you wanted to jump in. Why don't you jump in right there? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna build on that. I mean, Kalpana and I especially have done so much in the global space, and the schools that are most effective for their students are not choosing either or, right? They really are understanding who their kids are, where they're coming from, and then building on that context to make sure they're successful. So I just wanted to like echo that this is something that Kalpana and I and Jen feel really strongly about is that there's so much to learn from the global conversation and from schools outside of our local context that just feels like an entirely different way of educating kids and one that we can really learn from.
So, Jennifer, what are you doing together inside of schools now to help bring the knowledge all three of you have gained through your experience to light?
Yes, so we are focused on creating opportunities for building leaders to get together with other building leaders. So focus on that eliminating a lot of the isolation that people feel. We call ourselves building leaders. Like literally, you're in a building, you're one of one in your role leading. Who are your lateral colleagues? Who are the folks that you can go to be open and honest about the challenges you're facing, about the opportunities in front of you and how to really maximize them? And the learning you need to do in a way that you can still show up and be leading for your team and your staff. So the first thing we're doing is like creating spaces to bring those folks together so that they can access their own expertise and lived experience, share it with each other, access theirs, and then make new meaning together, get new ideas, get new perspectives. One of the key ways we're doing that too is through also allowing to eliminate the isolation from great ideas and from great models. So we're going on school visits with folks, going to schools that are a reflective point for folks to be able to see something that's working and ask themselves, hey, how is this leader making that happen? And what does that mean about what I could be doing in my leadership in my community? And I've seen, we've been leading visits like this for years and years. And over time, we've just seen it's such a powerful space in 48 hours to bring people together, shift their perspective by literally getting onto their building and going to see something new, connecting with people who get it, who they can be open and honest with about what they're seeing and what they're thinking about at home. And then use that as a real catalyst for what they're going to go do on Monday when they go back to their buildings and their spaces. So we're really excited. Our first school visit's coming up in March 4th to 6th in Chicago and Northwest Indiana. And we're just it's such a gift to be able to like help people come together and access that fresh perspective.
I just sort of
That's
share too, if I can jump in, Haley, as well. Like everything that Jen just described, at the core of it is our core value that you heard in the beginning about us, about our commitment to lifelong learning. And really what's at the most, I think, important core value of this approach is specifically because we are not we are valuing and elevating the collective expertise from a group of school principals and school leadership teams rather than our collective expertise, right? We aren't saying this is what you need to know. And this feels like a really fundamental difference in what you will hear, like just really, I think, hopefully, in terms of a deep belief in a fundamental design structure is how do we elevate the voices of the people who are doing this work every day to say, this is what's working in my school. This is the goal that I have. I need to see how it's being done in other areas, or I need the space to reflect on what's working, and then get out of the way of that learning, provide examples, and then get out of the way. And that feels really fundamental.
Yeah, like I'm not in a school anymore. I wasn't, one of the things that I think is so important, and I'm sure people are tired of hearing me say this, but I wasn't in a school during COVID. I think the game changed pretty significantly,
Mm-hmm.
teaching and leading during COVID. And so the best people are the folks that still have their feet on the ground that are doing this work. I love building leaders' emphasis on having their voices be amplified and their experiences be shared.
Yeah, I would add too that I think school leaders get a lot of training, right? There's a lot of training and there's a lot of professional development that folks get. And even to become a school leader, you're going to get a degree, right? You're going to get a license. You're going to go through a set of credentials. And the thing that I think really that is rare for folks and that we're looking to provide is that leadership development piece, that opportunity to be connected, not to like do this way. And there's a place for that. There's absolutely needed place for training and implementing what you've learned and programs, et cetera. But this is more about like organic reflection on yourself and your leadership and a chance to be in space practicing that with others.
And Haley, if I can add on to that, I think what makes building leaders special is so when you're the leader, as Jen said earlier, you're one of one, but also there's external pressures. There's often not other people that you can maybe safely say, I don't know, or I'm struggling with. And the need for psychological safety, we know, right, allows people to like take risks, to do different things in their school. And so, going back to the question you asked earlier, how does a leader like think that way creatively, daringly, if they're feeling constrained by a lot of different things, right? Whereas when you are in community outside of your school, going to visit some other place, you're with other people where you get to bounce ideas off of, right? You can be creative. You can think totally outside the box. You can ask questions and say, I have no idea what they were just talking about. I don't know how that leader did that. I've never heard of that system before. Cool. You're not going to get in trouble with anyone, right? And you're also not competing with anyone else, let's say in your district or network to be better than or to do something faster. You are just a learner who has expertise and also has things to grow. And you get to do that with other people who are similar to you. And that's pretty special because when you're doing your job day to day, you don't have that opportunity generally.
Hmm. So, what are the top three challenges school leaders are bringing to you all right now?
Hmm. I mean, I think, of course, sustainability is really not a joke. You mentioned post-COVID work in schools. I think because COVID both made everyone really look at their own well-being in a way that they hadn't before, I think that is now good and it's in the forefront, but then how do we hold that and the work we do? But COVID also meant that it opened the box as to what's happening in school. So now people have more scrutiny, more information, more, oversight maybe into what that is, judgment. And so, how do leaders keep doing this work that is quite difficult, that everyone seems to have an opinion on, everyone thinks that they know how to do, and everyone's telling them how to do? How do they stay in this work, stay fueled? I think that's a huge challenge that leaders are still facing right now. I also think that worldwide, this is not just in the US, but there is a staffing crisis. Like people are leaving the profession for various reasons, but they're leaving the profession. And more people don't want to necessarily take, especially the spot of the principal. People are often like, I'm good, I'll be a teacher leader or assistant principal, but I really don't want to take that top level of accountability and responsibility. So between leaders not necessarily wanting to stay in it and also teachers, like in the US, there's a huge teaching shortage, right? And so again, coming back to some of those things that came up post-COVID, but like how do we balance compassion for our staff and our educators and at the same time make sure that we are meeting the needs of our students because their needs also changed significantly while we were in COVID. So those are two big things. I think the staffing crisis and sustainability and just continuing to figure out how we meet all of our students' needs around the world. Again, we are now more aware of socio-emotional needs, mental health needs, neurodivergence, so many different things. And how do we do all of that inside of a classroom? Language, culture, everything. How are we doing that? How are we meeting the needs?
The other thing that's come up a lot is there's just a hunger for, as everything in our society has become more globalized, right? Like there's a hunger for creative solutions to similar problems. And what excites me about that sort of lens is, I really believe I've been a part of the fact that you can't you can't be what you can't see, right? And when we're in a school district and we are maybe we have, I know when I was in Aurora Public Schools, I had fantastic colleagues and folks that were leading other buildings around me. But the reality is we were all sort of swimming in the same water, like to go back to this goldfish analogy, right? We were all swimming in the same water. We were all being informed by the same bits of data or the same speakers or the same whatever, just contextualized influences. What I'm seeing right now and what we're hearing from school leaders is a hunger to look beyond their own small fishbowl and to get some creative new ideas and new perspectives. I have, as an example, leading a community of practice where I had a couple of, well, I have lots of these stories, but in one example, a school principal in Denver, Colorado became very close with and very aligned with a school principal in India. And the two of them would go back and forth and really like explore their challenges from an entirely different perspective, right? The school leader in India was not seeing that, they might have a similar problem, but their approach to the solution was so completely different because of their context. And so what I think we're hearing a lot of is help me see things from a new perspective. Help me see how other people are solving a problem and help me get some new ideas and some creative solutions.
Can anybody share an example of something they've seen recently, like post-COVID, in a school that they wish everybody knew about? Like just an example of either a tool or camaraderie or a system
Yeah.
that really struck you.
I don't know how precise this is, but let me tell you what is on the front of my mind when I hear this question all the time is I have having worked in probably about 35 different countries. I can tell you that what I've come to really understand is the importance of context. And I believe that other places I visited, other than the United States especially, are so much more focused on understanding the community around them and the influence that that community plays in the education of their students. So when you ask me this question, like, what do I wish? I can share just an example of a school in Mexico whose students that were graduating and they were they were being successful in school, but they had to leave their community to go find professions. They had to move far away to find a job. When there was actually like a BMW manufacturing plant very close and in town, but their students were not graduating with the skills that they needed to go and work locally and to be a part of their own community. And so it wasn't until, this is the practice that I'm preaching again and again and again. It wasn't until the community sat down and the school sat down together and there was an actual conversation of like, this is what we want to be true for our students. And schools being able to say, okay, we can provide those things, but we didn't know that that was, that this was a community influence. So that level, what I wish right now for our schools more than anything is that they would have those conversations. They would bring community, they would understand where they are and where their students are coming from and what their parents are hoping for them to be true at the end of their education experience.
Yeah, I think to bring it like a little full circle, Kalpana brought up at the beginning of the conversation the importance and relevance of, cultural competency and the experiences and lives of our kids. And Kyle, you're naming here that beyond the individual child, we also have to attend to the community perspective, and that extends not just within one home, but in the larger region that a school is located. I
Mhm.
think that it is not as common. I know it's not as common practice here, to your point, in the United States to have that type of learning. And I'm thinking about when I've seen it done well, how it really changes the dynamic nature of what a school can be and how families and community at large get involved
Yeah,
in a system.
yeah. Yeah, we have to stop disconnecting our students from where they come from and what they need to learn. That disconnection is harmful.
So a few of you have mentioned just the sustainability of the profession, both teaching and leading. If you could change like one policy or structural issue to make school leadership more sustainable, what would you change? And this is for anyone who wants to jump in.
When I think about school leadership and sustainability, I don't want to say the role of being a principal is impossible because there are principals who are out there doing amazing, amazing things. And I don't think it's impossible, but I do think it's very overloaded and I think it's very overwhelming. And for all the reasons that we've talked about, even right now, right? Of all the things that come at you, all the expectations, the trainings, blah, 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 all the things. So one structural change I think I've seen can be really effective is when the school principal doesn't have to hold all of the things, doesn't have to, especially in the US, where there is the expectation of them being a strong instructional leader and also holding the strategy and also holding the operations and also hold it's also, right? So when there are intentional ways to divide up that work and make sure there's maybe two people at least who are really not just taking the work and multiplying it times two, but really trying to divide it, but being very aligned, right? So that operations support the instruction, right? But that this person who is in classrooms and giving feedback is not also making the schedule and like figuring out recess duties and like also making sure the water pipe that burst has to be, because then they suddenly won't do an observation, right? Like there's all of those competing things. Whereas when the roles are divided and in really intentional ways. I'm not going to say it always has to be instructional and operational, but I think some splitting of the work so that people can really dive in and people in their school know who to go to for what allows people to really excel and the school to get all the things that it needs, but not one person to be expected to hold all of that. Because what it means for most school leaders is going in at 7 or earlier in the morning and staying till 7 or later at night and then checking emails until like 11 o'clock at night. And that is not, even if you're doing it for many years, that's not probably sustainable, from a perspective of good health and well-being. So splitting things.
I thought some of the best schools I've seen operate have two principals. One leads the operational aspects of it and financial aspects. The other leads the instruction, academics, teacher quality coaching, et cetera. And that really permits, like you are sharing here, it reduces burnout because you
Mm.
have tailored purviews and really tailored foci.
Mm.
There's districts that are doing exactly that, right? That are making that district practice. And I think that's part of why we love what we do is because we can shine a light on that and share for those principals who are feeling overwhelmed, a superintendent who wants to make things better. We can share some examples of where that's working. Um, my one policy that I would love or structural issue, I would just love this isn't going to surprise anyone, but I would love to see more opportunities for shared learning experiences, more cross-pollinating of ideas and different approaches. That just feels like that done in a vulnerable way is with vulnerability is really the most powerful thing I think we could be doing.
Can I add one more? I
Yeah,
get
of
an extra bonus
course.
wish. I also think that like coaching should be offered to principals throughout their career. A lot of times it's offered when people just become a principal, like they're transitioning new into that role, or maybe as part of a program. But just having that be something kind of almost like employee assistance, right? Like almost like that, having it accessible whenever you think you need that. Because going back to what we've talked about already, this need for a psychologically safe space to just vent, to just process, to make sense of, and then to work out, here's the goal that I have, and here's how I'm struggling to get there, and to talk about that with someone who's not associated otherwise with your district. I think it shouldn't be limited to when you're in a program or in your first 2 years of being a principal. Like I coach people who have been doing it for years. That's not the need to keep being creative, being strategic doesn't stop if you're an effective principal, right? So having that safe space and that separate way for someone to really see you and really know you is incredibly powerful. And that's partly what people are getting in our program as well, is just a chance to be seen and explored and for them to do the exploring and seeing as well. And so I think coaching would also be something really great to add on to people's shared learning.
I love that. And I think it really leads well into our last question here, which I'm going to do kind of lightning round style. What advice would you give? I'm going to do it as a leader, not a teacher. What advice would you give a leader starting their leadership career today? Jennifer, I'll start with you.
Find, assemble, and activate your lifelines. Like, who are the people that you are going to be able to reach out to when you need to make that tough decision, when you are not sure what to do with that great opportunity? Assemble them, line them up, and set yourself up proactively with ways you're going to stay in contact with them, because you need to have them activated, not just kind of on hold, so that you are constantly using them to nurture the work that you're doing, including like getting cheerleading when you need it.
Kyle, same question for you.
I think that I would recommend that they really get very clear about why they're leading and who it is that they serve. And letting and spending time reflecting on how that purpose is driving priorities and decisions. I spoke earlier about like sometimes we get influenced by maybe the principal we had as a teacher or whatever influences we have, like naming those, but then building this space and vulnerability to ask the questions and reflect and build relationships with staff and families and students before making any big changes. That feels absolutely essential. And I'm probably echoing exactly what Jen said, but I definitely would recommend that all of our school leaders consider themselves to be learners first and foremost. They're finding mentors, owning what they don't know, and holding expectations, high expectations, with deep care for the community. I just feel like, above all, vulnerability is an act of courage. And when you ask for support, you can find that it's out here, but you have to have the vulnerability to ask.
And Kalpana, last but not least.
You'll see some common or hear some common threads. I think the first is you have to know what unhealthy chronic stress or dissatisfaction in this work looks like in you, because it looks different in every person. And as Jen kind of said, have the people in your life who will call you on that and will, throw out a lifeline if you don't go to throw one to them. So people who will hold you accountable for that. I think establishing your boundaries and also just knowing what refuels you. So picking up on what Kyle said, why are you in this? Where's your happy place in school? How can you shift yourself to know when you need to put a boundary down and to say, no, now I'm going into this place. It sucks a lot of my energy. Not that means you don't do the work, but being more careful, but also knowing what gives you life. Why are you still here? Why do you choose not to go into education consulting like everybody else at this point, right? Why are you still a school leader? And tap into that, because that's energy. That's really powerful, and it'll be critical to get you through the long term. And the last is just finding the balance between humility and confidence. So knowing that you are for sure doing some amazing things right now that nobody else is doing, that is serving your children so well, that your teachers are so thankful for, and you have things that you could learn by asking questions, by getting out, by getting feedback. So just finding a way to balance between being really confident in yourself, but also being humble enough to know that there's more that you could do and more that you could learn. And there's places to do that as well.
Incredible. Kyle, Kalpana, Jennifer, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and sharing what Building Leaders is up to and why you all have dedicated yourselves to this work.
Thanks for
Thank you so
having me.
much for having us.
And thank you to everybody for tuning in today. It's been an incredible episode with these three incredible leaders. Thanks for listening to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and share this episode. Be the first to know when we have a new episode by subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or have a suggestion for an episode, email us at podcast@fullmindlearning.com.